Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. To support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys, head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
Movies from the 2000s.
Films,
early 2000s.
Motion pictures from pre-9/11, 2001, March of 2001. I saw this in the theaters with my friends.
I worked at the movie theaters, I believe, when this came out.
You didn't. Why are you going to make up lies?
I could have sworn.
Why are you lying? Why are you lying to them?
Yeah.
You've never worked at a movie theater. You've never seen a movie.
I'll spin whatever yarns I please.
I'll tell whatever tall tales I wish.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
My name is David Bell.
My name is Tom Ryman.
And we just watched The Mexican, starring Brad Pitt as the Mexican.
No.
No. That would be a problem.
DreamWorks Pictures presents.
He brings me the pistol, I give you to him.
This is so Jerry.
Hey, buddy. Is that your ball?
Julia Roberts.
Don't you listen? We broke up.
She has complaints. I don't have complaints, but she has complaints.
Exactly!
Brad Pitt.
I need a lift in your El Trucco to the next towno.
James Gandolfini.
Don't you love him?
Are you taking a side?
And if a person's a considerate lover, he can't be all selfish, right?
You know, you're a very sensitive person for a cold-blooded killer.
You don't know me.
So, first of all, big thank you to Mercurial Oz.
Thank you.
They are our patron producer who made this all happen, who delighted in asking us to watch The Mexican, Gore Verbinski's post-Mouse Hunt, but pre-The Ring.
So it's his second film.
Yep. I forgot. I was looking him up. He did the Budweiser Frog commercials.
Yeah.
He also did he did like No Effects and Bad Religion music videos. Yeah. So that's an unusual career.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's not that unusual. I guess it's just unusual the specific commercials and music videos that he did.
Yes.
Because like a lot of directors start doing videos and commercials.
It's more genre where it's like you look at the genres he's done, it's like there's no telling what he'll do at any given moment, like genre wise. Where it's like he's really done it all.
He's kind of a Richard Donner, right? Like he's kind of done every type of genre.
He really has, including edgy crime comedy.
Oof.
That's what this is. This is I hadn't seen this movie. I simply worked at a movie theater for it, so I didn't know what to expect here.
I've seen it, and I knew exactly what to expect. And 22 years of time did not diminish or contradict those expectations.
Right. So what would you say? Did you say you like this movie, Tom?
I hate this movie.
Okay. This isn't really a controversial take. I think ultimately I did not like this movie, but I saw a lot of good in it, and that's actually made me dislike it more. What they chose.
It has potential, yeah. The idea of the cursed pistol, I really like.
Yeah, it has an incredible cast.
Yeah, the cast is amazing. The people involved.
Yeah, I love that Bob Balaban is the villain.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on now.
A Gene Hackman, a surprise Gene Hackman cameo at the end.
Yeah.
You got a J.K. Simmons with a little wig on.
Yes.
With like a little
comb over.
Yeah. He's got
looks like the sweatiest man ever. Yeah.
Like a little music teacher comb over. Oh man.
Yeah. James Gandolfini.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Bradley Pitt and Julia Roberts as the lead. This is about crime that doesn't exist. Does that make sense? Where I was like the whole time I was like, what are you people? Brad Pitt. So it begins with, I believe, my commute when I worked at Cracked. The first shot, I'm almost certain that's a road that I drove every fucking day. But Brad Pitt runs a red light, or he gets
the
traffic.
The light, if you watch, the light like changes, like it kind of like flickers. So that it's this movie has kind of an idea of like fate or bad luck or curses.
Yeah.
But only sometimes.
I want to talk about that.
Only
I want to
sometimes.
talk about that because there's this motif throughout that because they keep going back to traffic lights and like this idea of like traffic lights and crossroads and, you know, like you said, fate. Where it's the idea you're at these crossroads and they change your life and you have these traffic lights that I guess you can choose to ignore or not. And I don't think it ever really follows up on that idea. But we start with that premise. And what we'll later learn is Brad Pitt got into a traffic accident with, I believe, Gene Hackman.
Yeah, that's the implication. I just...
Imagine that.
Yeah, and there was a body in his trunk because Gene Hackman's this big mob boss.
Right, and he goes to jail.
But I just wanted to point out that the traffic light like flickers because it's really subtle, and they spend the whole, like Julia Roberts spends the movie saying, oh, Brad Pitt wasn't paying attention and he crashed into Gene Hackman, and it's because he wasn't paying attention while he was driving. When it was actually like the hands of fate reached down and like tinkered with the traffic light.
There's this idea that Brad Pitt, the movie seems to want us to think Brad Pitt is a man with bad luck. Or like
sometimes,
fate, like you're saying, is stealing him. That's what I was going to say. I think he's his own worst enemy most of the time.
Yeah, usually.
But it's this, they don't do it enough. This is definitely in the realm of like trying to be kind of Guy Ritchie where like things just happen. But I would argue that because it's trying to be that quirky, it actually becomes extremely predictable because you always know that something like he walks away from the car that has the gun in it. And you're like, well, that car is going to get stolen. Why? How do I know that? Because the movie is trying to be unpredictable. So of course it's going to get stolen, right?
Yeah.
And so it kind of suffers that issue where it's trying to be so quirky that it ends up not quirky in my head.
Mm-hmm. And there's not enough of the luck idea of like the idea that this antique pistol is cursed. It doesn't come into effect enough to like, I don't know what it's trying to say about it. And I don't know, like, are we supposed to understand that like the curse of the gun is what changed the traffic light to make Brad Pitt do this, and that's what ultimately started all these dominoes to fall? Because Gene Hackman goes to prison and shares a prison cell with the son of this Mexican crime boss, and they have their family history is connected to this antique pistol. So Gene Hackman decides because this kid dies protecting him in jail that he's going to recover this antique pistol and return it to the kid's father as this sign of goodwill, and because it's a thing that needs to be done because there's this sweeping epic story behind the pistol's curse. But I can't. That's a super interesting idea to me, but it just never does enough with that idea of the curse or the bad luck. Like, I don't know. It all just seems random, and it doesn't really seem to be saying anything because
there
the movie
should have been a pattern.
Yeah, and the movie also goes back and forth between tones, which doesn't help either.
Right, because I was thinking the idea is whoever has the gun at any particular time, a bunch of bad luck happens to. That would be interesting, right?
Sometimes that happens.
There's rules, but that's not. That's what I'm saying. It's not what happens.
Yeah.
And that idea of like, does Brad Pitt? First of all, I want to start with the idea that I have no idea what Brad Pitt is, and what I mean by that is you just explained it. He got in a traffic accident with Gene Hackman, who then like made him work for the mob. So I'm like, is he a mob guy? Is Brad Pitt a hitman? Because I can't.
No, he's
tell.
like a bag man. He's a gopher.
Okay.
Because we learn. I mean, judging by that's just inferring from the only two jobs we've heard of him doing is it. The movie begins with him going to apologize for screwing up at this last job, which is what he was supposed to go pick something up and bring it to them, and that's what he's doing with the gun. So he's just like,
but like,
a
was he
carrier.
that because he got hit in that car accident?
I assume
like,
so.
Did they like? That's weird, right?
Right.
Doesn't that feel weird that the mob would say, you got to work for us now?
Right,
and it's like, I don't think that's how the mob works.
You got to work for my family for as long as I'm in jail. That's a really weird.
If the mob did that to me, I'd say, I'm going to the cops because I'm a civilian. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, I've never fired a gun. So that's what I mean is like Brad Pitt seems like he seems like he's in the mob, but also was like, hit a mobster and got put. So it's like I couldn't understand. Like, was he a mobster before the accident?
They're impossible.
Was he a
people.
bad guy? Yes.
He and Julia Roberts are people that don't exist.
Right, and there's a lot of this stuff where the movie is I'm a little like unclear about the characters because the other big thread of this is love. And the idea that this gun is cursed and it's around the idea of lovers. The problem I had with that is that we never see Brad Pitt and Julia Roberts like each other remotely.
No.
And so they start fighting, and then we're sort of had to be told that they love each other. And then we're just assured these people love each other.
You're right.
And it's like, I never see you guys love each other, so I never felt that aspect of it either. So it was very confusing. The two characters felt very confusing to me.
I also want to point out that in these fights, Julia Roberts is so poorly written that the two fights that start, well, there's really three, but the two main ones is there's one in the very beginning when we first meet the two of them, and Julia Roberts is screaming at him and throwing his stuff out the window because Brad Pitt has to go to Mexico to get this gun, but he's like, well, if I don't go, they're going to kill me. Like, they're going to murder me. Like, Bob Balaban said he would wrap me up in a rug with my head poking out and dump gasoline on me and set me on fire, or I could go get this gun. And she's screaming at him for going to get the gun. It's like, it's irrational. And it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
and then later on, when the second fight they have is over the phone when she's with Gandolfini, who's like escorting her to the airport. And she's calling him to let him know that she's at the airport. He answers the phone and says hello, and she immediately starts screaming at him as like, I didn't know whether you were alive or dead, and you answer the phone hello, and it's like he had no idea who was calling him. Like, it's just more ammo for what you were saying about how we never see them actually enjoy each other's company. It's both fights they have.
Hate each other.
Right. Both fights they have start from nothing. There's no conflict. It's just Julia Roberts starts screaming at him because the script said that that's what happens.
Right. She'd rather him die than not go to Vegas with her at the beginning.
It's like, they're going to set me on fire unless I do this.
Right. There's like an opening shot where they're both like smiling at each other in bed, and that is the extent of them being in any way kind towards each other. So there's a lot of problems right away with these characters for sure. The plot is that he has to go to Mexico to get this gun. And then this is where things get even more confusing. They don't do a good job, in my opinion, of explaining like the conflict within the mob. So it just starts getting really weird and confusing there too, I would argue.
Yeah.
Because what happens is he goes down there and meets this guy for the gun. And everybody's shooting their guns.
David Krumholtz.
Yes. Mexico is as stereotypical as Mexico can possibly be. Meaning that, close your eyes, imagine how Mexico is portrayed in movies. Bam, you got it. They went to a casting agency for street children, you know?
Yeah.
They're celebrating a holiday, a indescript holiday on the streets. Everything is yellow. There's no, like, civilization. There's
yellow
no, like...
filter, yeah.
Yeah, there's no, like, cities. It's just all like small towns. It's dusty everywhere. It's that Mexico, which, you know, again, a lot of movies are guilty of. So they go down there. He grabs this guy for the gun. I don't really know like what this guy's situation is and why he's giving him the gun. But he gets shot. He gets killed by a bullet that people are firing in the air. Which is fine. Bullets, I don't think it works like that.
Well,
but
it's like no, it actually does.
The bullets come down, but I thought it takes longer or they go farther.
I believe it goes farther, but it does. I mean, that does happen. That's happened a few times, like back home, like every 4th of July. That was I was okay with that because I didn't fully remember this movie. I just remembered that I didn't really like it, and I remembered a couple of things about it. But I thought like that was going to be the first step because Krumholtz gets just shot through the head by a freak accident while he's holding the gun. So I thought, this is the first part of the curse. We're going to see as this gun changes hands, we're going to see how this curse is. And maybe because I was thinking, did you see Bullet Train?
Yeah.
So
it was fine.
You know how in that movie, like the idea is that Brad Pitt's bad luck actually makes him lucky?
Right. Yes.
Like I thought it was going to be that in this movie because it's like, oh, he's in this situation
cancels
because
out
of
his bad luck.
Right. So I thought like that's why he was going to be able to be the one to get the antique is because he had this terrible luck. But that's not what happens.
Right. They also make it. This is one of the problems, and we already sort of talked about this. Is Brad Pitt also just makes bad decisions.
Right.
So it's like he's bad luck, but also just he sucks. Like the first thing he does is rent an unreliable car. Because he wants something more Mexican, and the rental guys make fun of him.
Yeah,
like they make him seem to be like really naive, And I couldn't tell, like, he seems okay walking into these places with a gun, but he also is just like kind of like a bumbling guy.
He's also kind of an idiot.
So it's like I couldn't tell like how skilled he was as a hitman. Or if he even was a hitman. Like you said, he's more of a bagman.
He's definitely not a hitman, but he does.
He's also not like an everyday guy because he's fucking handling a gun just fine, you know?
Right, and spoilers, he's fine shooting James Gandolfini to death later in the film.
Exactly. He doesn't react to that.
No.
So I was like, is he a killer or not? Like, what is he? He also says he met that guy earlier. So it's like, okay, so you're like a hitman guy. But it's unclear because of the level of like experience seems to vary with him.
Mm-hmm. It's
and
whatever.
The level of like,
it's his character is so strange. He's not especially likable.
No, he's
at times really sharp and a total idiot. It's unclear what his level of experience with the criminal underworld is. Yeah, like you said, it seems like they wanted to have like a goofball, but also like a Guy Ritchie, like kind of like wryly humorous, like streetwise kind of criminal, but also at the same time have him be kind of like a charming Brad Pitt type character. And it's just like he really does change from scene to scene depending on what they need him to be.
He yells about his crimes. Like when he's fighting with Julia Roberts and stuff like that. Like that's part of it is like he just doesn't seem very discreet either. He doesn't seem very good at what he's doing. And so the idea that he has bad luck, it didn't scan for me for the longest time.
We're introduced to him as he's taken before Bob Balaban, the imposing Bob Balaban, who is doing a great job. He plays a great villain.
Yeah, he's having a lot of fun.
And he's explaining to him why he screwed up the last job. And it's this long rambling story that doesn't have anything to do with the job. It's about, he's talking about, oh, I'm with this girl, my girlfriend. We fight a lot, but we're in group meetings. Isn't that funny? You guys know what I'm talking about. Anyway, we were having a big fight and she wanted to use the car at the same time. I was supposed to use the car to go do this mob shit that you told me to do, but you hid the keys on me and I couldn't make it to the mob shit you wanted me to do. So what are you going to do? Like, that's a thing that a stupid person says.
Right, exactly.
Like that's like you would go before the mob. Like he's supposed to be in the organization for 5 years at this point. This is supposed to be his last job because Gene Hackman's about to get out of jail. And if you wouldn't give the mob that excuse. You would expect to get murdered if you gave them that excuse.
Yeah, take a cab, Brad Pitt.
Yeah,
take a fucking cab. Like it's so weird. Like again, and so when the film like introduced the concept of fate and luck, I was like, what? Like, he's just a dumbass, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like, I thought he was a dumbass.
But sometimes he's not. Like, sometimes he's really sharp, like when he gets the drop on J.K. Simmons.
Right. But then we have, so the stuff with the mob is equally confusing because what's about to happen is he gets the gun and the guy dies, so he calls J.K. Simmons, who's like, I'm going to come there, and then the car gets stolen, right?
Mm-hmm.
He has to chase down the guys who steal the car. What we later learn is that they're working for the person who Gene Hackman is working
with, they're working for the Mexican crime boss.
Right. And so Gene Hackman is there in Mexico and he's working for Gene Hackman. So why would they do that? Why would they send the guys to steal the car? Why can't they just approach him and say, oh, excuse me, I burped. Why can't they approach them and say, we're working for the same people? Like, we'll take it from here. Like, what? Like, there's this idea that he says, like, internally, he doesn't know who's going to betray him.
Hackman says that, yeah.
Yeah, but it's really unclear of, like, who's working for who. And ultimately, it felt very, like, convenient, the ways they would do stuff, where it's like, okay, if he thinks that Brad Pitt's working for Bob Balaban, I don't know, shoot Brad Pitt. Shoot him, take the gun. Like, also, he seemed to know where they were going. Why send Brad Pitt at all, then? Like, because he's still ordering Bob Balaban, and then he just suspects that Bob Balaban, when the gun gets to him, is gonna steal the gun.
I guess you can explain that by being like, I guess you can explain that by because the guys steal the car with the gun in it moments after he leaves the bar with Krumholtz and the gun. So you could infer that like they were like, okay. I learned that Bob Balaban's gonna like try to steal my criminal empire out from under me, try to get the gun for himself and sell it to somebody else and cut us out. So let's go get the gun before Brad Pitt gets it. So that would explain why the Mexican gangsters show up at the bar like moments after Brad Pitt is leaving
Right.
with Krumholtz.
It doesn't explain why he then finds them at another bar just hanging out.
Nope.
With the gun.
Nope.
Like acting like they're just car thieves.
Right. Why wouldn't they
because-
take it right to the boss? They would take it right to the
Exactly.
guy.
They would take it right to the guy. That's what they were out to do.
Right.
So like the movie wants to have its cake and eat it too. Is
Yes,
my point.
yes,
Where
it
it wants
does.
this chaos, and then it wants to tie it up in a bow at the end, and it's like, and there's the same with like James Gandolfini. I wasn't completely sure like why. So the idea was there's two hitmen fighting over. They decided that they were scared that Brad Pitt wasn't going to do his job, so they take his girlfriend hostage, and it was like
As leverage. Yeah.
but like I don't know, why just spend those resources on going after Brad Pitt in Mexico, or like again, it was all like very like weird, sweaty like ideas of like, and then there's a second hitman, and then he assumes the identity of one, and it's like, what are you guys doing? Like this is so weirdly complicated.
That
like,
one wasn't that hard to wrap my mind around, because it's like, okay, if they think, because Brad Pitt has the gun at that point, like, and if they think he's going to sell it to somebody else, they're going to park somebody on his girlfriend to make him decide otherwise.
Right, but why then? What was the point of the second person? It was competing Bob Balaban.
Right, it was competing
versus.
Okay, I wanted to say James Gandolfini's presence in this movie is baffling. This character is baffling.
Yeah, I was waiting for this. I think he is the most interesting character.
He is.
They wasted everything about him.
Yes.
Because what happens, this could have been its own movie. And in fact, I'm pretty sure there's been movies like this. James Gandolfini basically is fighting another hitman over the right to kidnap Julia Roberts.
Yep.
Then when he kidnaps her, he's a very interesting guy. He's very straightforward. She's like, "Are you going to kill me?" And he's just like, it's hard to tell right now. Like, he's very calm. He's trying to say to her, like, listen, yes, you're a hostage.
But if everything goes according to plan, no, I won't kill you.
Right. And Julia Roberts seems to act like someone who's also connected with the mob. Like, she's upset over death.
She is a baffling character.
Exactly. Where, again, it's like Brad Pitt. I'm like, it's unclear to me how connected to crime you are. And so she starts having a relationship with James Gandolfini that's very kind of fun. It's cat and mouse, but also like they're both kind of sharp towards each other. And then we slowly learn that James Gandolfini, we learn that he's gay, and she becomes like his wingman, basically, which is a baffling idea that they go to Vegas and he picks up a guy, and I'm like, are you a professional or not, James Gandolfini?
The movie is off the rails at this point. Like it's them on like a it's them on like a road trip at this point. It's like she's basically like helping James Gandolfini get his groove back at this point.
Which is, I think, alone would be a fun movie, but you have to spend the time to give it room to breathe.
Right.
So
If you're going to tell that story where it's like this hitman kidnaps this woman, they become friends, she becomes his wingman, she helps him believe in love again. Like, because that's kind of what this subplot is. That needs to be the whole movie.
Yeah. And it would be a delight. And through the whole thing, they make a really fun idea, which is that like when he's on the job, he's a terrifying man. He's a James Gandolfini type.
Right. He's a Tony Soprano type.
Yeah. And so like it's this dynamic of like, yeah, he's a murderer, but he's like and so like that could have been a really cool idea if at the end he's told like you have to shoot her, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's what a movie like that goes
That's what
towards.
It's building towards, obviously.
Yes.
Obviously that's what it's building towards.
But they make him the far most interesting and likable character across the board.
Hands down.
James Gandolfini is playing it really fun, and then Brad Pitt kills him, and I was like, do you understand that we don't like Brad Pitt anymore now, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's supposed to be the hero, and he kills the only likable character. What are you doing, movie? Like,
right, and
you are not winning me
Julia
over
Roberts
by doing that.
Weeps over his body. She and
then gets over it.
And then they never mention him again after the scene. It's so weird, Dave. Like,
it's really weird.
I can't wrap my head around this decision.
Right, because I thought, oh, she's never going to talk to Brad Pitt again after this.
Right?
But she forgives him. And she, like, remembers the sage advice from Gandolfini later. And it's like, yeah, but he shot him. And at the last minute, they do this thing where they're like, no, look, he was actually bad. He was the bad hitman this whole time. And it's like, really? Because he was awesome. We liked him.
Because we liked him and they became friends. Like, that was...
Yeah,
that was far and away the more interesting story being told here.
Right.
Like,
you know, the classic screenwriting idea, shoot the cat. Like, that's what's happening.
Strangle the cat.
Yeah, they make us like James Gandolfini, and then they have our hero shoot him. And then they're like, haha, yay.
Very coldly, coldly. Because it's not just that Brad Pitt shoots him. Like, afterwards, Brad Pitt is, like, gloating and shouting, I win, and, like, raising his hands up to the sky.
Right,
after
he's an asshole about it.
It's like they're really rubbing our faces in the fact that they just killed this character that we really liked.
And so if you were making a serious movie, you would, because this could happen in a movie. No one, you know, we've had movies before about this idea, which is like two likable people that we both like who are in a situation where they have to kill one or the other. It's a tragedy, right?
Yeah.
There's,
yeah.
There's like very good stories told like that. The problem is that I think the movie didn't realize how not likable Brad Pitt's character was.
Yeah.
Because I think they thought that's what they had there. But the problem is that we don't like Brad Pitt. He's been nothing but like kind of a doofus. And then he kills this guy we like. And then he gloats, like you said. And it's like, okay, well, if you wanted us to make Brad Pitt the villain, then you did it. Brad Pitt's now the villain in my mind. But then the movie ends with him still as the hero. And that's like the problem where you're like, whoa, so you wanted me to like him? You wanted me to like him after that.
I don't have any idea what this movie wanted me to feel.
I think the movie did not understand its own characters and what the audience would think about its own characters. I think they genuinely thought that since he was Brad Pitt and since he was being kind of Brad Pitt about it, that we would automatically be on his side. But he is never shown as being like a very good guy. They give him a dog. But even the dog, he like points the gun at and is like, get out of here. Like, they never make him likable enough for us to ever be on his side.
Yeah.
And so when he does a really unlikable thing, it just makes me hate him more.
And they never talk about Gandolfini after this.
Yeah, and it makes me hate Julia Roberts now.
Right, like
I'm like
2 scenes later, she's sitting there watching a soap opera in Spanish, like just putting her feet in Brad Pitt's face while he's on the phone, and she's just like, "Oh, see, you don't need to understand the language to understand this emotion." Like, she has completely forgotten this character that she was friends with.
Because of this, I really had trouble figuring out what any characters wanted at any given time. When he goes to fucking Gene Hackman at the end and he's like, give me the gun, Brad Pitt's like, fuck you, why should I give you the gun? At that point, I was like, I don't know what were you going to do with the gun? Like, I thought that was the point. I thought you were going to bring the gun to Gene Hackman. I thought that was the entire fucking goal.
I think what's happening there is Pitt he's had it at that point. He's like, all right, I'm sick of this game. I'm sick of everybody being like, I'm sick of this gun trading hands. I'm sick of everyone thinking I'm going to sell the gun, because it was never his intention. It was never his idea to try to screw anything up. He was trying to do it correctly. So I think that's the idea behind that. But it's still, in that moment, it's like the stupidest thing he could do.
Right. I would have, like, it's one of those things where you're screaming at the top of your fucking lungs. Like, what he should say in that moment is, yes, I want to give you the fucking gun. Like, he should go off at him about that.
Yeah.
Of like, it was never a problem, you asshole.
I always wanted to give this to you.
Yeah. I'll take you to it right now. But instead, he's like, no, fuck you. And it's like, come on, man. Like, you can still yell at him, but you can, like, not be confusing about it. Everybody's so confusing in this movie.
It's just like his opening scene where he's given that ridiculous excuse to Bob Balaban. It's like, you would know that shouting this at this man, you're going to get murdered. Just like, just tell him, look, I just want to give you... It's like you said, he just goes between being clever sometimes and then doing the absolute dumbest thing possible other times.
Yeah.
And then the movie what the one of the frustrating things about it is that it works, because like Gene Hackman is like, It's like that joke they do in Ted, where Ted is just like cursing out his manager, and the manager's like, nobody's ever stood up to me like that before. You're promoted. Like Gene Hackman has basically the same response here, where he's like, I respect your gumption. It's like, no, you don't.
Right. Because it's all just so fucking random.
Yeah.
The like at the end she shoots the gun and like a ring comes out of it. Did they establish the ring?
No.
Okay, because I was super fucking confused of what that was. I assume it's the wedding ring from the lore that they kept telling, but they didn't like justify it enough. To me, this movie feels like we mentioned the Guy Ritchie-ness of it because of course there's that. It's
not shot or edited like Guy Ritchie, but you can tell it's got the Guy Ritchie DNA in the storyline for sure.
Tarantino is another example, and what Guy Ritchie and Tarantino understands, and I feel like we've had this conversation before about other films from this era, but what they understand is like it's not just like what this movie seemed to think is like, let's take a bunch of things and shake them around and just be like, oh, so random. Everything's random. And it's like, no.
Yeah, there still needs to be some connective tissue there. It still has to like thematically align and be in service of something. Here's the best example of that I can think of is when they tell the story about the gun, which is basically this gunsmith back in, it looks like 19th century, like 1800s. This lord is coming. He wants a gun to be made for him. So this gunsmith makes him this really, really fine weapon. But the deal is that he has this beautiful daughter who his apprentice is in love with. But he's like, no, you're too lowborn and poor. He's going to marry the Lord's son. She's going to marry the Lord's son when I give the Lord this pistol. So his apprentice curses the gun. So the gunsmith, we get a couple of tellings of the legend around the gun where the gunsmith keeps trying to get the gun to work, and every time it's fired, it ends up killing either the person who fired it or it ricochets in a wild way and kills somebody else. So it's clear the gun is cursed, and then finally the Lord shows up with his son to marry the daughter, but the gun doesn't work. So the Lord's like, oh, you've insulted me with this. So his son is going to shoot the gunsmith's daughter. He's going to shoot the apprentice. So the daughter picks up the antique gun and points it at the Lord, but they're like, oh, it doesn't work, so it's fine. Apprentice convinces her to put the gun down. Lord's son shoots the apprentice. She picks up the antique pistol, distraught, and shoots herself, and it goes off that time because the legend is like, oh, in the hands of a pure person, it will actually fire, but otherwise it won't fire.
Right.
Okay, so we tell all that to tell you that when they do these flashback sequences, you hear an old-timey projector start up, and it looks like an old-timey film, for no reason. Like, I get why you would stage a flashback sequence like you're a person watching an old-timey film because it's a memory. But like, the movie's not about film. Brad Pitt is not a film buff. There's no narrative or character reason for Brad Pitt to be imagining the flashback story this way. It's just Gore Verbinski thought it looked cool and put it in the movie.
Right. It's just things that look cool or seem neat. Ideas. It's a lot of ideas smushed together. Mm-hmm. And it creates this inconsistency because if you want to add chaos into your world, you have to make other things consistent, right? Like randomness should never just be truly random in a movie, really, because then it's just sort of like, I don't know, like you're saying, it just feels completely unmotivated.
Yeah.
So like if there was an element of chaos, if the gun was chaos, then you need the stuff around the gun to not be chaos.
So we can
like
tell.
James Gandolfini can't be this fucking quirky on his own.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to make everything fucking quirky, but by making everything quirky, there's no like contrast.
Right.
You can't tell what is fate, what is the special force at work here.
Yeah.
Because they keep talking about it. Like, again, like Pulp Fiction, he runs into Marcellus Wallace crossing the street. That's fate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they fight, and then they go into Zed's place, and that's also fate. But then you understand why they go their separate ways after that. Whereas, like you were talking about with Gene Hackman, he's just sort of like, okay. And it's like, I don't understand why G. Hackman is into Brad Pitt or forgiving of Brad Pitt. Like you can make the world random or the world chaotic if the people in the world make sense in what they're doing. But they're not really doing that here. It's just people sort of deciding to do whatever they need them to do at any given moment.
In order for the gun to actually be chaotic, like chaos has to be introduced when the gun is introduced. But when everything is chaotic and random, you can't really tell what effect the gun is having on anything.
Yeah, and like you said, the flashback stuff is a good way of pointing that out, which is like it really feels like he had a lot of ideas that he wanted to put in, but he didn't know why he was putting them in.
Right. There's
the Vegas stuff again feels so like he wanted to tell a completely different story.
Yeah, that's a different movie.
Yeah, he had this other idea, and he was excited about that other idea, and it's like, make that other idea then, you know?
Yeah, it's so weird and out of place with this Brad Pitt storyline. And it
really is.
The Brad Pitt storyline, by the way, is boring, right? He just kind of goes from place to place. It's really, the movie feels really aimless too.
Every time they cut back to Brad Pitt, I lost. Whenever they went to James Gandolfini, and by the way, everybody's doing a great job. But again, it's about writing and character, which is that Brad Pitt is playing a dipshit who's not that interesting. It's just not.
That's just what was written, man. I don't know what you.
Yeah. Every time they cut back to him, I just lost interest, especially since he keeps just going. It's the same fucking that light. He keeps going to the same locations back and forth. Yeah. It feels like, so it's not very interesting either.
It felt aimless. I mean, even actually no. I take that back. The Brad Pitt stuff definitely felt aimless.
It does, and it also, again, has that Guy Ritchie idea where it's so trying to have so many setbacks that it's predictable. Like he goes to the airport, and of course he has the wrong passport. It's like, of course. Whatever happened to J.K. Simmons? Do we catch up with him?
No, he and the pawn shop owner that Brad Pitt handcuffs him to. Yeah, he comes back, and it's clear that they got a little box of tools and escaped, and we just never see them again.
We never see them again. And it's shit like that where it's like you need to wrap that shit up. In order, again, you go back to the Guy Ritchie of it all, and what Guy Ritchie would often do is he'd have these interconnected things, right? He'd have these things that are apart, and then they'd end up kind of tying together at the end in satisfying ways. This doesn't do that. J.K. Simmons doesn't come back at a convenient time to do something that changes, the course of, none of that. Nope. It's nobody's actions set this Rube Goldberg chain of events or anything like that. Stuff just happens and plots just get dropped off when they need to. Again, James Gandolfini just gets killed.
Yeah, and then we don't meditate on it. As soon as that scene ends, it's just we never revisit it.
No consequences. It doesn't mean anything later. It doesn't come back to bite Brad Pitt on the ass.
Not at all. Julia Roberts isn't even mad at him. She asks him one question, which is that sage piece of advice we mentioned earlier. And that's it. She never explains that, hey, he was my friend and you killed him and that's fucked up and I hate you now.
Yeah. At the end when they drive off and they yell at each other as they're driving off.
That's how the movie ends, with them yelling at each other. I'm thank God this timeless romance has been preserved.
Yeah. It's there they go, two toxic fucking people who ruin the lives of people around them, I guess.
It's an awful
that's all they are.
It's an awful trope. It's one of the more embarrassing writing tropes of male writers, where they think a healthy relationship is a woman yelling at you all the time.
Right.
It's such a trope, and it's so embarrassing. I don't know. Anyway, the one of the parts I hate the most about this movie is the finale. The standoff between Brad Pitt, Bob Balaban, and Julia Roberts, because it makes absolutely no sense, right?
Yeah.
Bob Balaban comes all the way to Mexico to kidnap Julia Roberts and throw her in the trunk, and comes out of his car and points a gun at Brad Pitt and 7 Mexican gangsters. So there's 9 guns pointed at Bob Balaban's one gun. And he's like, nope,
there's
everybody.
No way he's getting out of
everybody this. Put your guns down. I've got Julia Roberts in the trunk and she gets it by Yemeni. If you don't tell me where the pistol. Why is he still talking? Why haven't they shot him 17 times at that point?
Yep, and then just open the trunk.
He never had the upper hand. I don't understand because they all put their guns down, and then he opens the trunk and gets Julia out so they can have their weird standoff that mirrors the story of the gunsmith's daughter and apprentice, where Bob Balaban's pointing his gun at Brad Pitt and Julia's pointing the antique pistol at Bob Balaban, and it's the same situation where Brad Pitt's like, no, it's okay, don't shoot him, this is fine. But they wanted to get to that, but not only is it completely unearned because Brad Pitt and Julia Roberts, their characters have no connection to that story whatsoever. Right. So why is it these characters that are, if the movie's about fate, why are these two people fated to be the ones to relive this? They have no connection to it. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But the fact that the scene happened because Bob Balaban got the entire gang to put their guns down. Right. It doesn't make any sense.
No, none of it makes sense.
It's like he gets out of his car and is like, pulls out his gun. He's like, haha, I'm like, why aren't they killing him right now?
Yeah. Because they need a result. It's top down, right? Where they want this like standoff. And it makes the film, again, very predictable, I would argue. And very like, I don't know. You just see that it's trying to be really quirky. Like, you know what's a good example for me for the whole thing is these boots are made for walking. So she's listening to it in the radio, right? She goes into this mall and it's still playing at the mall. And she goes into the bathroom and the two hitmen are following her, right? Mm-hmm. And the movie wants us to think like, what's going to happen? And I knew what was going to happen because I was waiting for the part where they say, "Are you ready, Boots? Start walking." Because every filmmaker wants to put an action scene when that line happens in the song. So by trying to be cool, it's one of the most predictable scenes that's trying to not be predictable because James Gandolfini is hiding behind the door is the reveal. Mm-hmm. But you know that because you know what the filmmaker is trying to do. It's top down where he's like, he really wants to have someone get shot during the song to that one's part in the song because everybody wants to because it's cool. Mm-hmm. So they can't kind of help themselves but to do the cool thing. And by that, because of that, the movie becomes like you kind of can like envision it backwards as it's happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Where there's like a predictability to it all and a nonsensicalness to it all because they want a specific result and they want the result to be really cool. And so every scene is sort of built for that, where it's like it's clear that he thought of that moment and then went backwards. But because of that, everything kind of telegraphs it. And often like nothing quite makes a lot of sense either. Because it's, oh, yes.
Oh, I mean, I'm sorry. Are you finished? Please.
No, yeah.
Okay. Sorry. That's interesting. I totally agree with all of that. Right. But I wanted to that mall scene where they all walk into the bathroom, Julia, then Hitman 1, then Gandolfini. Right. That's actually the only bit of praise I want to give this movie because
sure.
the sort, I guess, motif of that scene, I don't know if that's the correct word, but I thought it was actually kind of clever where it's Julia Roberts is sitting in the middle of the food court drinking some kind of drink, a Starbucks or something. Right. And then it pans out and we see the first hitman who we find out is the actual Leroy, whereas Gandolfini pretends to be Leroy the whole movie, but we learn his name's actually Walter. Anyway, so the first hitman's watching her and he's also got a drink. He's like drinking a fountain drink. And then it pans out from him and we see Gandolfini and Gandolfini's watching him and he also has a drink and he's sipping from his fountain drink. So it's like predators at a watering hole. Right. It's like Julia Roberts is the prey. You got Predator 1 watching her, but then Predator 2 is watching Predator 1.
For sure. No, that's the thing is Gore Verbinski, again, he started with music videos. So he's thinking in terms of like small moments. And I think at this stage in his career, I don't think he wrote this, but I think there's this feeling of like trying to make these cool ideas, but not thinking about crafting a bigger story. And so that's why this movie is kind of like all over the place because I think it feels like a lot of like, I want this to happen in the movie. I want this. I think this is cool.
What's interesting, did you notice one of the producers was Lawrence Bender?
Who's that?
Band Apart.
Oh, okay.
It's one of the producers of Reservoir Dogs, I'm pretty sure, right?
Interesting.
Like, I was reading a little bit about this movie. David Fincher almost directed it, like he wanted to direct it.
Oh, wow.
Because Brad Pitt was involved. It started out, the script was written by, it was written on spec by some guy. I think he was a first-time screenwriter, who was an actor as well. But it got shopped around. Every major studio passed on it. So it got picked up by Bender and the other producer, and they were trying to, get a distributor. Brad Pitt got involved, I forget somehow, but it basically all came together because of the people that were attached to it. Like DreamWorks heard that Brad Pitt was going to be in it, and he had talked to David Fincher, who was interested in directing it. And DreamWorks heard that, there's this movie floating around that doesn't have a distributor. And it's got Brad Pitt and Fincher attached, and DreamWorks was like, holy shit, let's, they swooped in and picked it up. But kind of right as they did, Fincher was like, well, I can't do it because I'm doing post-production on Fight Club. So it's just like, this movie is almost like the script was almost kind of cursed, like The Gun.
Yeah.
It seems like they knew the script was bad, right? Because like every studio passed on it, and it sort of got made just because Brad Pitt got attached, and then from Brad Pitt, David Fincher was briefly attached, and then because Brad Pitt was involved, Julia Roberts was also involved because I think they're friends. And
everybody was smelling.
Yeah,
they were smelling like this is going to be the next like Tarantino or Guy Ritchie thing.
Yeah.
So like as we said, this movie has a phenomenal cast of people doing a great job with what they're given. The problem
they're not
is
given
that,
very much.
Right. Well, that's what's interesting is like every individual scene, I think, is fine. Like the dynamic stuff, but when it's the big picture, right? It's like it's all fucked up.
They don't come together to make anything.
Yeah, it doesn't make anything that makes sense.
This is barely a story.
The characters are okay within the scenes for the most part. Like Julia Roberts getting in that fight with Brad Pitt makes sense if she doesn't give a fuck about him.
Yeah.
If she's like, but then we learn that she cares about him. So that fight doesn't make sense anymore.
Right.
Because that was my thought at first. I was like, oh, she's a bad person. She doesn't like him.
She's supposed to be the most sympathetic. We're supposed to be on her side.
Brad Pitt and James Gandolfini in that scene it's fine in a vacuum. But then when you find out the context around it, you're like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Why would I like this scene? Why would I?
Yeah.
Like, why would you do it this way? And so, yeah, it just feels like a lot of little ideas that are just crammed together in a way that just none of it fits.
Yeah, it's a real mess. I remembered hating it, watching it again this time. My memories were correct.
Yeah. It's funny. I didn't dislike it as much as I do now talking about it. Because, again, scene to scene, it's like, yeah, this is fine. Again, the actors are doing a good job. I'm enjoying the people in it. But when you step back and talk about the big picture, it really is just like, not great. Not great.
Yeah, I suspect if you watched it again, you'd really...
Yeah, I'm not going to watch it again.
The Gandolfini thing, that was what really... Like, I still remembered that, and I remembered how weird it was. And then coming back and revisiting it 20-odd years later and seeing that it was exactly as weird and jarring as I remembered. It's like, rewatching the movie and knowing that that's coming, like, really colors it, too. Because it's like, well, I can't enjoy these on a scene-by-scene basis because I know it all kind of amounts to nothing.
Right, exactly. Because like I'm still giving it when I'm watching it the benefit of the doubt of like, surely this will all
this is gonna go somewhere, right?
Right. Because imagine Snatch if like all those little pieces just never went anywhere, and it's like, well, those were all fun on their own, but there's no like. Big...
I think they were trying to do the Bullet Tooth Tony thing with Gandolfini, but it was like it's not the same character. The tone is totally different. Like
It's trying to be quirky. Yeah. It's trying to be really quirky, and it doesn't have bad ideas. The problem is it didn't have the skill enough to connect those ideas in any way.
There was no vision to this movie.
Right. Yeah, it's sort of that thing of like this is why you outline movies, is because, there are people who claim they do this, and I still am like, bullshit, but maybe they do. People who like sit down and they just start writing something from beginning to end. And the thing about doing something like that, and whenever you're like, young people think that. When I started writing, I thought, I can just write a movie. I can just sit down and start the movie and figure out where it goes.
Nope. The
problem with that is that it's the John Mulaney joke about writing happy birthday on a banner, which is like, you need to plan it, because if you don't, then you end up fucking yourself later, where you're like, oh wait, I wrote myself into a corner here. And this feels like that. It feels like they didn't plan it. They just started writing something filled with ideas, and then at the end they're like, I don't know, and then it ends.
Yeah,
like,
I kind of
yeah.
I don't outline as hardcore, but like I definitely know how it ends.
Yeah, you need to know how a movie ends so you can set it up in an interesting way and like tie it together in an interesting way, especially a movie like this.
Then you go back in subsequent drafts and you hone it and make sure everything makes sense and cut out stuff that doesn't make sense and add stuff to make other things make more sense, so that it all connects. But like, yeah, like you still have, like, it all needs to still hang together and still be a story. Like,
right. You like, again, if by the end of this movie, you're thinking like, oh, it's about fate and these people loving each other and about luck, then you have to go back and make Brad Pitt have bad luck.
Right. Make the movie actually be about those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't
but
just
it feels like
say
it's
them.
just sort of,
Like,
yeah, at the last minute say like, oh, it's actually this. And it's like, no, it's not.
No,
I
it
watched
isn't.
the movie.
Yeah. How dare you?
Yeah, exactly. You can't tell me a character's in love and not show them being in love ever. Like, no.
Not a single time. Not a single time.
No, they hate each other.
It's the only time is when he takes that ring that she shot into Bob Balaban's neck and he puts it on her finger.
Right. And I was like, why?
Sure, man.
Why would... Yeah. Ridiculous shit.
Sure, I guess. This movie sucks, Dave.
Mm-hmm. The Mexican folks.
Yeah, I hate this movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's it, right? That's all
we've done it. We've fulfilled our obligation.
Yeah, thank you, Mercurial Oz.
Thank you
for giving us the Mexican. I mean, you didn't get, unless you're Gore Verbinski. You're not Gore Verbinski, are you? You tell us, right? I think it's you legally have to tell someone if you're Gore Verbinski.
Yeah, if we ever get a patron whose name is Vor Gerbinski, then we'll know.
Well, no. Yeah, speaking of which, we have a Patreon. That's what this was through. Patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. You can do this, what Mercurial Oz did. There's a tier where you can have custom We Just Watched. We also have, just for $5 a month, you get access to a bunch of podcasts. Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and Spiel Boys. We watch movies every Friday night with our patrons as well. A lot of fun stuff on there. So check it out.
We also have a store. Head over to gamefullyunemployed.com where you can find a link to our Teespring store where we have all kinds of cool original artwork and designs you can get on t-shirts, mugs, stickers, posters, all sorts of things. So
check it out.
Yeah. Slap your little peepers onto that.
Do it. Absolutely.
Yep. And not the Mexican. Don't keep your peepers far away from the Mexican.
Yes.
This is
remove your peepers and throw them in the air.
Mm-hmm. Toss them into the sea. They'll be better off.
Mm-hmm.
Be better served, your peepers would, in the belly of a fish or some monstrous whale.
Yes.
Than watching Gore Verbinski's The Mexican.